Hello and welcome to this month's Practice as Research Network. I'm very excited to have you all here, and it's great to connect with us via the YouTube channel as well. So in this seminar series for this month, and I know that it's a little bit of an awkward date actually, because we've got a clash with the UCL Education Conference, which I didn't realize. And for some people, it's already the Easter break, which I also didn't realize when we booked these dates. So I do apologize for that. But nonetheless, we have got a really exciting talk prepared for us today, and that is held by Dr. Eleanor Dare. Eleanor is going to be talking about art-based research and immersive visual storytelling, and I've had a slight sneak peek at her slide deck, and it looks really, really exciting and interesting. So do stay with us on that. Eleanor is joining UCL as a lecturer in practice-based research and in media, and she is going to be teaching on the media program in the UCL Knowledge Lab. So Eleanor is, in a way, you know, I mean, I'm quite sort of lucky really to have her here, because she's kind of a new member of staff, and I've kind of poached her already for the network. So thank you very much for being with us. Eleanor comes from the Faculty of Education, Cambridge, and was formerly also a reader in digital media at the RCA and head of program for MA Digital Direction. Some of Eleanor's work, short stories and academic publications, can be found on the rejectedshortstories.uk webpage, and I'm going to make available that link in the YouTube channel as well. So with no further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to hand over to Eleanor. How we've planned it out is, as always, we're going to listen to Eleanor's presentation first, and then we've got an opportunity to discuss some key points from the presentation. Eleanor, just to let you know, I am here. I'm just going to mute myself in case I'm coughing and spluttering, but I'm not going anywhere.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to everyone who's turned up. I know I'm sure it's been a really long, hard term, so I really appreciate you being here. And I hope it will be interesting, and I hope that you'll be able to join in conversation about this. So, I mean, a lot of my work, the work I'm going to discuss today is in some ways a reaction against a sort of hyperbole which I encounter over and over again. I'm just going to make this a bit smaller because it feels odd, I can't see you. That I encounter over and over again around, in particular, immersivity and virtual reality. So my work is in some ways quite reactive. So I'm going to talk about a couple of recent projects. This one, The Life of Galileo, which is a sort of an experimental stage using Mozilla Hubs, where we've been at Cambridge exploring performance, but also I've been using a Brechtian methodology of deliberate distancing to sort of to break the immersion and to surface, in particular, power relations entangled with technology. Brecht's analysis of technology and power seems more than prescient to me now, especially with a lot of the metaverse discourse. And I'll also discuss queer psycho. I'm very engaged with using immersive spaces within my teaching and within my research, and this is a space I'm developing at the moment, which is a Koch, a von Koch curve or fractal shape, and it's for an idea of fractal writing that I'm developing at Cambridge. And in fact, there is a space which I thought maybe I could invite everyone into. So I'm going to share this link. Ideally, if you haven't got headsets, it would be good to mute your microphone when you get into Hubs. I'm going to share the link there in the chat, and then I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to share my screen. So if you can't get into the space, I'll show you what happens inside it. If you don't mute your microphone and you don't have headphones, there'll be a horrible feedback loop. But at least mute your microphone if you can't. So I'm going to go into that space and then share my screen as I go into the space. Here we go. So it should start loading now. There we go. Ooh. So here I am, and I should see some other people joining in this space. I'm really interested in fractals in the context of, hello everyone, it's good to see you in the space. Oh, somebody's put a Christmas message, that's good. Fractals in the context of art-based research as that which in some ways defies classical framings of mathematics, of geometry, of categorization, which are a sort of a kind of a challenge, which I find useful and interesting to the backdrop of potential backdrop of positivism, which comes with AI, machine learning, big data, an array of very determining technologies which education is entangled with. So I'm going to stop sharing that because I can hear a feedback loop. You can stay in there if you wish. And I will now resume my PowerPoint. Sorry, just sorry, I'm just okay. So I'm going to reshare my PowerPoint. Sorry. This is a sort of typical strategy I've been using recently for teaching, but also for performance, creating spaces in Mozilla hubs, often starting to model them in Blender or even Unity. And I'm also working on a project about Waterford, the city of Waterford in Ireland, where I'm using an immersive space for workshops discussing smartness and smart cities and what they might mean. This is a space that I've been working on the last couple of days. But what I wanted to talk about was this project Queer Psycho, which is a reworking of Alfred Hitchcock's film from 1960, Psycho. A lot of my work, for some reason, is about Hitchcock, and I've got a number of pieces that where I've tested, in particular, some of the empathy rhetoric around VR technology by recreating the motel room from Psycho, and then asking, who are you empathizing with when you're in this sort of voyeuristic position of looking through the hole at Marion Crane? Why is empathy a good thing under all and every circumstance? And what does it mean to reduce to the individual that which may be systemic, for example? So I deploy queering strategies and A-effect, distancing effect, in an attempt to break some of the canonical patterns and subjectivities of immersive technology and cinema. The open world of Queer Psycho is a form of exploratory narrative. It's a paradoxical variant of exo-theatre in which players, who I also think of as player drivers, this differentiates them from the non-player or AI drivers, navigate a landscape of barren mountains, motels and roadside cafes, searching for their lost partner. At times I surface the artificiality of this world, revealing its structures, its underlying geometries, its lights, its fragmentations. The title might suggest, Queer Psycho might suggest the idea that Hitchcock's original film is not queer or was not queer, but watching it many, many times and analysing many papers about Psycho, including the unforgettable Dudenhofer's Elbows and Arseholes, the anal work ethic in Alfred Hitchcock Psycho, Mariani and Bergnac, and not least Doty, 2000, all support the assertion that Psycho is already in many significant ways a queer, or rather queered film. And queer is taken to mean a process, as Eddie Sedgwick puts it, and as not following the set lines, the boundaries of heterosexuality or heteropatriarchy, as some people describe it. But it can also be a kind of perspective, an academic approach, a methodology to use queerness as a critical perspective, as a kind of methodology. So, for Doty, queering is articulated as something apart from established gender and sexuality categories, not the result of confused or vague coding or positioning. And for Lomas et al., immersion, and in particular VR, are inherently queer. implicated in significant abandonment of agency once we put our work into the hands of audiences. I just want to play this opening scene. There's no speech in it, but what I like about it is that it's automated. Much of it is automated, supposedly AI-driven cars and crowd scenes that I generated through particular vector mathematics, rather than modeling each movement as in traditional animation. And there's something about it that's uncanny, and people have told me there's an uncanniness to it. So I'm going to play this. So Queer Psycho is part game, part cinematic experience, part interactive narrative. It's not straightforward for me to define at all, but it might come under Espinar's definition of an ergodic text. In the wider sense of text beyond written words, the word ergodic is a combination of the Greek words for work and path, and Arseth uses it to define text in which the reader must work to find a path, in which non-trivial effort is required to allow the reader to traverse the text. So it means, I think that term ergodic means the most for me in terms of what this work is about. The effort is one of driving and noticing, but also of exegesis on the part of player drivers for whom the plot's never fully revealed in explicit terms, but rather deconstructed, put together again and repurposed, a bit like a sort of deconstructed theatre form. The shallow impression of realism is, if anything, broken by uncanny automated agents and cutscenes in which I've deployed AI, or what I call vector mathematics, to automate street scenes, as in the flashback I've just shown you before. And here in this corner, I've used this sort of breaking up of terrain, so it loads, it's optimized to load as you drive through the scene. But actually there's a kind of a lag where you look across the landscape and see the absence of landscape in a really uncanny way. And I've deliberately deployed that now. I've kept that because I like the unfolding of the landscape as you drive through it, a bit like this kind of theatrical events where you see what's going on, where you see the structure of the play. Anecdotally, I've noted an increasing turn to Unreal Engine. Most of my work here is made in Unity and with Blender. And anecdotally, I'm wondering if that use of Unreal is in some ways driven by an aspiration towards a particular type of realism. But it's important to question what realism means and to reflect on Rancière's observation that realism claims to be that sane attitude of mind that sticks to observable realities, but it is in fact something quite different. It's the police logic of order, which asserts in all circumstances that it is only doing the only possible thing to do. That's clearly problematic. As Alston observes, the construct of total immersion tends to be an important ambition in the making of these kind of immersive media. And I really like his book, which addresses a series of connections between the modes of production and productivity that audiences are expected to subscribe to in immersive performances, and those that subjects are expected to subscribe to beyond the supposedly total boundaries of an otherworldly world, particularly with regards to a neoliberal scheme of production that has become instituted in systems of governance, and which risks imposition as an ultimate dimension of value and meaning for citizens, workers and leisure seekers who have to deal with its entrenchment. I note with a degree of unease the extent to which a form of emotional labour is entangled with some educational projects deploying immersive technologies such as Punch Drunks, to name one of the most famous, Our Home Story, and the wider enrichment projects for schools. Emotional labour in this context is taken by me to mean the entanglement of affect with work, such that an emotional response is a requirement of that work. In the case of children engaging in such experiences, learning might be framed as their labour. The extraction takes place when an emotional response is necessary, such that it risks alienation, the superimposition of extrinsic emotional states in the name of alignment to the needs of an organisation. Such alienation has even been linked to poor health, see Chi et al. And Grandi, 2003. Just want to play a little scene here from Queer Psycho.
Within a few minutes of my checking in, the receptionist Norma was trying to convert me. I couldn't imagine what it would be like to be queer and live in this neck of the woods.
I used to be like you. You don't have to be like you are. Take this card, come to one of our meetings, over in the church, you can see it from here.
I pretty much ran down the corridor and locked my door.
So in staging Queer Psycho, I've used artificially generated voices which do not display any fluctuations in emotion. The register of those voices is always evenly delivered, flat and controlled, aiming to distance player drivers from the emotional labour of empathy and presence. Instead, player drivers are invited to bring a systemic analysis to bear upon this open world of Queer Psycho, to understand the underlying structural and systemic tensions of that world and to formulate interventions. Even the grand finale chorus at the end of Queer Psycho is sang without inflection. To highlight the presence of neoliberalised immersive emotional economies, Queer Psycho provides signposts, literal and metaphorical, pointing to the presence of immersive technologies. The presence of a fulfillment centre in the middle of this world also points to the often hidden labour or ghost work of digital interaction, in keeping with Alston and Gray and Surrey, who states, Alston states, neoliberalism in a post-industrial era valorises immaterial forms of production and consumption that are based on the psychological and physiological capabilities of producers and consumers. The signposts in my work are designed to prompt, as Alston urges us, reflection on the terms and nature of an audience's productivity and its attachment to certain kinds of participatory freedom that may not be as free as they first appear. Splitting up the terrain of Queer Psycho, as I mentioned earlier, and loading it when player drivers approach a particular region makes for both a more efficient management of this open world, but the visibility of the process also creates an explicit sense of scene change. Such scene changes become visible to the audience as the software catches up with the player driver. In this vein, automated vehicles are present within the scenography of Queer Psycho, exerting an uncomfortable force following the player driver and swerving to avoid collisions. Their presence is partly surveillant, partly supernatural, alter egos shadowing the protagonist. These vehicles are also engaged in a form of labour, albeit machine-driven, one that taps into fantasies of robotic servitude critiqued by Rua Benjamin and Alison Adam. These labouring yet emotionally inexpressive elements are positioned here by me as transgressive actors, countering the neoliberalism of much immersive discourse. Those of us in age groups which preceded Unity and Unreal Engine often began programming immersive visual and sonic stories with Flash or Java or Director, C++, and may therefore be familiar with power struggles over the dominance of immersive software within education and the wider world. These power struggles continue, evident in both Unity and Unreal Engine, the platforms in which I've created these works, who have changed their business models away from educational licenses to personal licenses as one strategy. The intention, as Keo and Nicole articulate it, is one of maintaining a relationship with developers for the duration of their working lives. This is a lofty ambition given the forces which might impact software. Those of us who are attached to the workflow of Flash and Director saw their quite rapid demise once iPads and browsers stopped supporting their plugins and players, driven by Apple's desire to dominate the mobile web. Keo et al. Write of their concerns about digital monocultures. The further anxiety here is that if students only learn how to use one platform, then they might become perpetually stuck within its ecosystem. So I'll just play another part.
Are you getting my messages, Soph? Can't seem to get through to anyone directly on my phone, and the internet has gone. It's getting cold up here, too cold to go out. Can't wait to see you. Maybe we have been too rash, too quick to end things. Anyway, I miss you, that's all I mean.
So, the metaverse discourse of the 2020s has also been sadly lacking in critical grounding, and it seems an array of child abuse scandals are rare points of sober re-evaluation. Queer Psycho's countermeasures and specific strategies for queering immersive storytelling have deployed an array of features and processes, including these automated cars as uncanny agents, photographers shadowing the player drivers, absurdly reminding them of the mediated ideological nature of immersion. AI voices without the capacity for emotional inflection speak my scripts. Queer cutscenes, angles, and queer characters, references to film history such as the Arbogast Fulfillment Center here, a little in the shop here. Arbogast is a private detective in Psycho, searching for the missing character and transgressive thief, Marion Crane. In Queer Psycho, time is non-linear and often folds back into itself, enabling player drivers to drive backwards into the narrative. Scene changes and computational efficiency measures, such as splitting up the terrain, are visible to player drivers, reminding them of the underlying affordances of digital mediation. So I'll just play this scene as well.
Why were there so many kids waiting outside the fulfillment center? Soph was doing some work on child labor just before we decided to have a break from each other. I wondered if the work was getting too intense. Those kids look tired.
So when this final scene is reached, if it's reached by players, here we see all the lost queer characters are discovered trapped in this warehouse. The digital actors come together to sing an emotionally flat final song. These strategies are intended to ask questions of the software, such as how do we perceive within it? After Neumark, and ourselves, I should say, after Neumark, I considered the software and processes through which immersive narratives develop and unfold as a medium and material in which we perceive rather than an object that we perceive. The critical and creative strategies outlined here have the intention of surfacing the assumptions, affordances and dissaffordances of the technological and social ecology of immersive media to avert a critical vacuum in which immersion becomes a spell, arguably making us too beguiled to exert political and social agency. I'd just like to play this final grand finale scene.
We were lost and now we are lost again.
We were lost. We were lost. We were lost.
We were lost and now we are lost again.
We were lost and now we are lost again.
But it is our loss and we are together. We can separate because we want to, not because you were taken from me. But it is our loss and we are together. We can separate because we want to, not because you were taken from me. All together now,
we are lost again.
We were lost. We were lost.
All together now, we were lost. And now we are lost together.
Yeah, so thank you. Nicole advised that 20 minutes is a normal amount for the speaker to
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's great to have listened to your talk. I really enjoyed that. Obviously, I'm going to invite everybody to kind of join in that conversation and ask any questions. But I do have some questions of my own. So if it's okay, I'd like to kick off. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is this production process practice? Or is it practice and research, or is it research-based practice? How do you define? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, how do you define?
Well,
where do you draw the line?
Yes, I mean, and I think your sort of struggle to articulate that chain of causality, that relationship, is appropriate for me. I suppose it's art-based research, but that is a very entangled and complex process, such that they roll around each other and ideally move forward as they roll around. So yeah, it is research, and it is by practice, and it would be completely different if it was abstracted away from the practice of developing of using 3D software, of using game engines, of using code, of using an array of different materialities that come into bear upon this. My understanding would be completely different. So I think for me, that is a useful working definition. Would it be different if I wasn't engaged in the practice? Yes, completely. Is it illustrating theory? No. Those for me are the distinct points.
Thank you. I mean, from my own sort of, from my conceptualization, I don't think that, the practice needs to necessarily represent a theorization as such. So I do, again, I quite empathize with what you're saying. Yeah. It certainly resonates with me. Now, in this series, for this academic year, we've kind of tried to focus on reflexivity and the role of the researcher practitioner in that process. May I ask you, how do you deal with reflexivity? If you're saying that your work is practice as research, and it wouldn't be anything different because it is practice and research, or arts-based research as you've defined it, where do you sit in that process, and how do you make sure that it doesn't become too much the artist's playground and not enough the researcher's playground, if you see what I mean? Yeah,
that's a good question. And I mean, is there a sort of I don't know to what extent I have a conscious strategy. I think I've been doing it for a really long time. I did a PhD by practice, an MSc by practice, an MA by practice. I suppose I'm sort of deeply embedded with the relationship between research and practice, such that I think there is a balance. However, I would say I'm not one for reflection. I think it probably is diffraction, not reflection. Reflection can be critique, can't it, in terms of a sort of a mirroring of oneself, which is quite hard to see where our relationship with others or the other comes into that. So I think diffraction. I think teaching helps I hope neutralize the worst of the bullshit that comes out of my head in terms of students of challenge. So yeah, but it's a really good question. Yelena, your hand is up.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting. I was wondering, this is something that I'm also kind of thinking about a lot, is this type of work kind of presupposes that there is a specific audience, or that it is public facing work. And I'm wondering, what do you think is the best way to engage, or what is the audience that you imagine for it? And what do you think is the best way to publish it as well?
Yeah, so great, really good question, Yelena. And for me, it's a very political question as well. Thus far, I've been disseminating my work myself through drives and giving people links to it. I don't engage with Steam or any of those other platforms, but I think that might be a limit. I've recently been making my own sort of metaverse, my own Zoom platform. I think because I'm very loath to become subsumed into much of what's going on. However, Hubs is an exception. So a lot of my work is on Hubs because they've made very strong statements about extractivist data processes against those processes as a counter to meta or metaverse. So I think it's a really good question, and I'd like to talk with you, Jelena, in future about that, because I'm in very much two minds. I would like as many people as possible, a great diversity of people as possible to encounter my work, but I'm also loath to open my work up to right-wing misogynists or fascists. I don't want to engage with them. So it's a difficult one, especially with Gamergate as well. I've been a little bit stung by some of the misogyny that's come out of some gaming communities, and I just do not want to be around it. What do you think, Jelena?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, well, thinking about platforms, I'm really interested in the hubs as well. And but if you think about it, also game engines in themselves are these types of platforms, and it's kind of really hard to avoid technologies that aren't politically, I guess, problematic in some way.
Yes, it is. I mean, hubs. I'm beginning to sound like I've got shares in hubs. It's open source, has this great, what I think is a convincing statement about minimal extraction of data. So if there was one platform that I'm ready and able to support at this point through my work without feeling very torn, it would be hubs. But that could change, just like other Audacity suddenly got sort of taken over and turned into the worst kind of extractivist machine. So things can change quite quickly.
Thank you. So can I just sort of bring up, like building on that conversation that the two of you have had now about making that work being recognizable and recognized for its value as well, and disseminating it in the right platforms. I mean, that seems to be something that filters through all practice as research talks that I've heard this academic year, where a lot of people are saying, well, there isn't a journal that accepts this kind of work because it's just too out of there and it's too bizarre and nobody really understands it, and even sort of more sociologically or educational inclined practitioners find it difficult because images, for example, aren't accepted in journals. So even a photograph is really difficult to get in.
Yes.
Is that so? Can I just ask, what are the challenges in your view with doing that kind of work that you're doing now? Is it that even within your own field of experts, it doesn't get recognized much? Or is it that only a very sort of particular group of people recognize it? And what could we do in the development of practice as research to rectify that?
Yeah, it's such a complicated question. I don't particularly crave a mass audience. I want a diversity of people to encounter my work. It's interesting to see what they think about it, and I hope there's some things of use to it. I suppose at conferences, festivals, various exhibitions, they're small audiences. The thing about hub stuff I've done is at least that it's been international. So there've been times where there've been people from not quite every continent, but many continents engaged at the same time, having that kind of encounter. So I value that. I think partnership is probably the way to go with, I don't know, museums, art galleries, places that are not too horrible. Anyone else have any idea? Brigitte.
Yes, Brigitte.
Hi guys, nice to see you. Thank you, Eleanor. Lovely presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have lots of kind of questions, but I guess just to draw back to kind of asking question about practices research, because there's so many conversations about this at the moment in UCL actually, where is Nicole initiatives, then there is another initiative in applied humanities BA course. Who is it? Where is it based? I don't even know where it is based. So those guys want to come up with an overarching kind of structure for practices research, and then obviously we're doing our thing. And I always fear that each of these people do recognize these, do describe practices research differently, and they make it into a thing. And I fear that many of us actually, we just doing it because we want to exist in the academic environment, but really we are artists who producing work. And actually that's one of the questions just for me as well to Eleanor, that do you see your work kind of presented within gallery environments and museum environment as an artist, or would you like to have any impact with your work? So would you like to feed this back to industry? I have a
baby. Yeah.
And
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to be set up a binary. There's only one or the other.
Oh yeah. So the question is, do we, is this something we put out there as an aesthetic statement, or is it something which really should some point arrive to places who can make changes, if it's platform, if it's game, if it's industry, and so on. It's more like impact, when I'm sure many of us been producing work and then exhibiting in art galleries and thinking, okay, how many people gonna read this? Or academics, how many people are going to read my art?
Well, I mean, there's different types of impact. I mean, there's one project I've been involved in called Crafting Futures, which is a British Council Royal College of Art project, where the impact potentially is enormous. We've developed a relationship with the Craft Union in Kyrgyzstan, and developed an array of approaches to supporting craftspeople to develop skills to get their work out internationally known, to get into a market. And that and there's been a sort of chain of events where the government seems to be making a shift in policy around craft and craft education and funding of craft, which for me is definitely a very significant impact, an impact beyond our wildest dreams, that shift would take place, partly because of ongoing conversation and ongoing evidencing through practice of the value of the work that those arts and crafts artisans are creating, and using in particular hubs for when COVID shut down our ability to travel. I created a yurt camp in hubs, and that was part of the practice, part of the ongoing, how can someone in a mountainous village in Kyrgyzstan have their work seen internationally or by collectors in America or Europe. So I do believe in that impact. I've worked with industries that where I found people who I found sympathetic and interesting and intelligent and ready and not wholly subsumed in neoliberal hype. That can happen as well. So I would never set up a binary where it's one or the other. Ideally, it would be great if we're an environment where all that stuff can happen.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting because, from the kind of conversations I've had with a number of people through the network and outside also, there does seem to be, for some people, a difference between those that are artists and those that are artist practitioner researchers, and kind of in a way inhabiting that space, like Brigitte said, in the academic world. And like Brigitte said also, I do also see that there are many shifts and many initiatives, different people trying to set up networks like this one that recognizes the practice as a way of generating knowledge and understanding, of developing understanding and doing research. And I think that's also recognized even at UKRI level, where now they're, for example, they are shifting away from a traditional CV to a resume as you go into grant applications. The idea behind that being that somebody who's a practitioner may not have 15 different, academic journals published, but may have exhibitions and galleries that are counting towards that kind of knowledge and presentation.
The other thing about relationship with industry, it's really easy to forget that industries find it very hard to innovate. They're very slow. They're very huge, and are not necessarily doing the most exciting work. And their relationship with academia, with the kind of practice that is experimental, that is able to have the freedom to not be bound by wholly bound by neoliberal imperatives, is actually really useful to them, because their industry is very, very constrained. And I think the question that begs the question: where is true innovation taking place when people are rewarded for replicating existing power structures, existing processes? So everything I know from talking to people, particularly in the games industry, is that the sort of work that comes out of an interesting university is really valuable, really important. And that's why they look to student researchers, postdoctoral researchers. Someone like Microsoft engages highly with postdoctoral researchers for that reason, I think.
Now, this is me being a little bit selfish here again, but may I ask you, Eleanor, in terms of, because you said you define your work as arts-based research.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we've had colleagues here who've been talking about arts-based research, who have done a sort of a slightly different kind of artist creations to yours. And then there is, sort of, because they are, for example, visual artists, or they are people who are curating for exhibitions in galleries and museums. But then there's also the kind of arts-based research that's sitting in the social sciences, where, somebody may be creating something together with participants as part of the data collection process, or part of the dissemination process. Can I ask you what kind of body of literature or what kind of, sort of background do you use to define your work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And again, I wouldn't set up a binary. I've been involved in both of those scenarios, Nicole. Definitely in participatory work, for want of a better word, as well as our stuff that's on a continuum that should be, which has been exhibited in galleries. So I don't see myself. How'd you put your hand up? Just speak. I'm not too attached to hard and fast binding categories around this. I think the whole point of arts-based research and post-qualitative inquiry, which we haven't mentioned, is not to be bound by a sort of dogma. Will, sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. I just thought there was probably a button for it and I just couldn't find it.
There was a hand somewhere, you go.
I was curious. You were talking about the games industry wanting innovation and looking to academia for that. I was kind of curious if that's a two-way relationship, and what you think the best way for academia to take the innovation from industry back into academia, if you like.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Where I think it's worked well, I mean, for me personally, it's worked well where I've constructed electives with an industry partner, and there's been a sort of two-way dialogue, a close attention from the industry partner in being involved in that. I think where it doesn't work is actually surprisingly where it's sort of a bit more hands-off, and we just go away and do something and present it to them. I think it's actually really interesting when there is really close relationship.
I suppose what I meant is really the industry is vast, and there are so many commercial products coming out all the time.
Yeah.
That there is no. It would be nice, if you like, if there was an academic way to collate these new experiences that are being produced by people and selling, and sort of and have. Because there is sort of a lot of innovation happening, but it gets lost. So every year there's a load of new things, and people, it's a flash in the pan. People look at them, and the next year they're forgotten about. And of course, the big giants like Ubisoft and whatever just make the same, or at least for the last 7 years, just make the same game over and over again. And that didn't used to be the case, but it's destroyed the AAA aspect.
Yes,
it's not fun anymore. No one likes that. It's boring.
Yeah,
but this other stuff is there. It's just that one wants to kind of document it, or in some way elevate our attention to it so that we know it's there.
Yeah, it's a really great question, Will. I mean, that's something maybe we should be doing, is having an annual event within I don't know, in the Barbican or somewhere where significant interest, there's a review of significantly interesting, breaking away from the same old stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the industry then, see, the problem is that also got started up a little while ago as a let's do that, right? So there's these industry things, and then it doesn't, what happens is they open that to the indies, in quotes, who aren't by this time independent at all. They're all multi-million pound teams with loads of money going, how do we keep making loads of money? And so the thing that was designed in order to catch the innovation actually ends up catching a sort of middle rung of people, and then the new innovators end up underneath that, like always at the bottom somehow.
I absolutely agree, and I mean, that's the danger. You get subsumed into a culture, or subsumed into sort of mediocrity of very, very monumental organizations, and hence my ambivalence, but not my readiness to have a binary opposite sense of opposition, but my ambivalence about what happens when that occurs, and interest in maintaining distance from it on the whole. Don't know. Is it like, I suppose this is where the metaverse idealization comes in, that everyone will be sort of don't have a high degree of autonomy yet ownership.
These newer things seem to be a form of a system of control, and that things like Unity and Unreal now, since they've become how to say, easy to use, right, for the layman. What the layman ends up doing is going, well, it's easy to use as long as I make these particular types of thing within the engine, which then means that, yes, of course, within Unreal and Unity, if you're a professional, you can make anything. But if you're just a ordinary person that doesn't know how to do that, you just end up almost being forced to make exactly the same game over and over
so in
again.
the gun, the Unreal, the sort of default scene is a man with a gun, isn't it? I mean, again, to me, that is an argument to the value of the kind of education I've been involved in. It's easy to feel cynical about what we do as educators, but actually, when I look at the sort of legacy of 15 years of teaching from Goldsmiths onwards, the work that people are producing is not like that. It's about being trans, it's about being queer, it's about many different really interesting and important urgencies emerge through that. So I think that is where the value is. But I think I take your bigger point, Will, of how does anyone end up knowing about that outside of our niche environment? Is a bigger question. But I don't think it's insurmountably impossible, do you?
Well, it's also, how do we make sure that we don't become insulated from all the other people that are because as I say, I sort of found it felt a bit cutting when you were like, the industry isn't doing innovation, because obviously I work in the industry, so we definitely do innovation. It's just that you don't hear about the things that what you hear about is the latest, the same game kind of thing. And I think it's important that we make sure that the academia sees what the industry is doing that is innovative, as well as that the industry sees, because I'm coming from the other side of the other side.
So it's not, so it's a two-way problem, isn't it? That we're not, I think the generality is that the world is conducive to dreary sameness and repetition of same old stuff on the whole. If you have a market and money's invested, you don't want to risk on the whole. So there is a sort of it's a kind of a logic to it. So how do we all escape that logic is the bigger question in terms of what actually gets promoted or what gets disseminated. No, I didn't mean to take away from any.
No, I understand. I'm just sort of saying how I perceived it. And yes, I think you're absolutely right. It's about how do we promote how does one change the rules so that the thing that's actually new might even be better? People might even like it more, but it's a risk because we don't know that. So we want the rules to change such that, that these innovative things get pushed more than the safe things, whereas at the moment it's upside down.
Same with the film industry, to replicate a formula. Sorry,
Brigitte has got her hand up. Can I bring Brigitte in, please?
I just lots of good kind of thinking here. I think it's quite interesting what we're saying, that it would be interesting to explore how, because we always talk about industry, and I do fear that it's many times is a very one-way street. And it's quite interesting, the point what we raised, that there are innovation happening, but it's disappearing. And this idea of experimentation come to my mind, that, you know, academia is used to be the place where you can safely experiment. And but I have to say that many of the new development in academia, I think, or that's maybe just my own journey, is that I kind of fear that, you know, the experimentation part, especially in practice, is being removed because of the pressure of putting something out which is, you know, highly sophisticated and internationally excellent and so on. So it almost feels like it's not just in the industry, you know, there are, you know, struggling to bring, you know, experimentation. So I feel that, you know, these media is now used by probably some you know, it's some grassroots guys who probably in a way think much more than, you know, academics or industry. And it would be interesting actually to join these forces together. And see where, you know, what is practices research, because I do believe, you know, and I think that's what BA Media is trying to be, is bringing, you know, the idea of practice into academia, but not just as an illustration of some concept, but much more to be, you know, experimental. And I hope that with this we get actually more time also to experiment.
I mean,
it is a knowledge production, what was said.
And then of course you'll get someone like this book here, which critiques, and you know, the problem is knowledge beside itself, Holler, that critiques the extractivism of arts as generative knowledge. You know, this sort of metric where we all have to prove what a score we've got, is hugely problematic. And you know, when you're talking, I'm thinking, well, the education's an industry. We're in an industry. We're not separate from industry, and we're subject to the same tendency to replicate power structures. These apparently immutable power structures. I think this construct of the fugitive from my memory's gone blank, mine's gone blank, but fugitive academics who are doing the work in spite of the overarching dreariness of the landscape of education.
Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to listen to all of you discuss this, because a lot of this, I mean, obviously, you know, you're talking about areas of expertise that are outside of my realm. I'm not somebody who's, you know, in media and production at all. So I'm coming to practice as research from a slightly different angle, and a lot of what you've said totally resonates, you know, and I think that's probably, you know, the thing that we find actually practice as research resonates with so many different disciplines and takes and interpretations, which I think is in a way the way forward. Is, like you said, you know, let's not try, you know, let's be careful about not insulating ourselves and isolating ourselves. I think that's also by focusing on our disciplinary conventions, we probably do that because we don't necessarily see the practice as research that's going on outside our own disciplines. So I think, you know, by looking at other disciplines like I'm doing today, looking at your discipline, it actually helps me understand my own practice at a slightly different level. And that's what I'm hoping to kind of develop as we go through. Right. So I'm quite aware of the time. I would like to say first, you know, I want to wrap it up properly to make sure that nobody has to run off, you know, and nobody gets lost. So I want to say, first of all, Eleanor, thank you very much for doing this at such short notice as well. I really appreciated you doing the talk today and being with us and discussing. It's been really insightful. Everybody else who's contributed to the discussion, thank you very much for having been here. I do hope that we are able to connect over some more practice as research over the next few weeks and months. I'm going to share a couple of slides very quickly. Dr. Monica Sassatelli is going to be our next presenter on the 4th of May. And Monica is coming from a sociologist background. So she's going to be talking specifically about research with drawings, where the artifact and the practice of drawing are a constitutive part of the production of knowledge within sociological and social sciences research. That's obviously sort of more at home with me, but I'm sure everybody who's here will also be able to gain from that. I've seen a sneak preview of Monica's talk, and it looks like it's something that's going to be really exciting again. Also, do please subscribe to the recordings on the PAR YouTube channel, or to the audio podcast hosted on the PAR Buzzsprout channel, which can also be listened to on Spotify. And do check out the Practice as Research website. If you want to be updated with any kinds of details, the PAR mailing list for regular news and the newsletter is on there as well. And you can obviously contact me at nicole.brown@ucl.ac.uk as well. So again, I'd like to say thank you very much, Eleanor. It's been a great pleasure to have you, and I look forward to connecting again in the future.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for the links. They look really useful as well. Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye.